Dear friends, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel. This is the daily review of the situation on the Ukrainian front. Before the briefing, the usual reminder: YouTube's algorithms keep throttling our channel. Videos get shadow banned and show up far less in recommendations. So the episodes still reach you, please subscribe and tap the bell. It takes a couple of seconds, but really helps the channel break through the platform's restrictions. Let's start with a curious story. Many of you have probably heard that fuel deliveries to Crimea are now running into serious difficulties, partly because of Hornet-type drones. The day before, footage appeared of a fuel tanker driver literally dodging such a drone while still on the move. That's what fuel supply to the peninsula looks like today. Tanker drivers operate under constant threat of a strike. Without exaggeration, very risky work. Now to a more serious and possibly significant development. The previous evening, a strike hit the dam in Zaporizhzhia and the bridge across the Dnipro. An important detail: it was delivered not with missiles, but with guided aerial bombs, KBs. Missiles are of little use against such heavy structures, while gliding bombs cause far more serious damage. According to the Ukrainian side, the Dnipro-Hers area came under the strike, after which traffic across the Preobrazhensky bridge over the Dnipro was shut down. A detour was set up via the Novi Bridge and the Dnipro HES Dam. It's too early to call this the start of a systematic campaign to disable the Dnipro crossings. But the fact is telling: if Kiev strikes in the Belarusian direction, Moscow may well take the Dnipro bridges seriously. This, it seems, is the transparent hint to be read between the lines. Since the conversation has turned to Belarus, let's take a closer look at the situation around Zelensky's ultimatum. To recap, the Ukrainian president said there was supposedly some equipment near the Belarusian border and demanded it be pulled back, or the Ukrainians would do it themselves. Many ask, is a ground invasion of Belarus by the AFU, Armed Forces of Ukraine, actually realistic? Not pinpoint drone strikes, but a full ground operation, by analogy with the incursion into the Kursk region 2 years ago. Let me say at once, there's no cause for panic. A full-scale offensive should not be expected, and here's why. What would even be the point? The nearest large city on the Belarusian side of the border is Homel, about 35 kilometers off. The nearest small settlement, Narovlia, with around 9,000 people, is still about 25 kilometers away. Even the closest targets are far off. Now let's recall the Kursk region experience. Back then, the AFU advanced only about 20 kilometers, after which the offensive ran out of steam and turned into a rollback. And a colossal force was committed, more than 20,000 troops at the start and around 50,000 at the peak, between 5 and 12 or 13 brigades. Does Ukraine today have the ability to free up such a mass of troops? The question is rhetorical. Right now, the Ukrainian command can barely pull even a single brigade. That would immediately tell on the sector it was taken from, while one brigade decides nothing in the Belarusian direction. By the way, Kiev has already made a similar mistake. A brigade was pulled from the Kostiantynivka sector. And the result is obvious. Today, Kostiantynivka is effectively on the verge of being lost, and Ukrainian formations, by all appearances, will not manage to hold the city. So there's no need to fear a full-scale AFU invasion of Belarus. I won't claim it with 100% certainty, but it's an extremely unlikely scenario. Individual provocations, though, sabotage and reconnaissance groups slipping into border villages, drone attacks and the like, are entirely realistic. A full commitment of brigades, however, almost certainly will not happen. For the same reason, neither Belarus nor the Russian army attacks Ukraine from the Belarusian direction. There simply aren't the resources, above all the manpower. A similar assessment comes from Minsk itself. Oleg Gaidukovich, deputy chairman of the International Affairs Committee of the lower house of the Belarusian parliament, stated that Belarus has no equipment at the border that would adjust strikes against Ukraine, contrary to Zelensky's claims. In his words, the Kyiv leadership's goal is to drag the conflict out and draw in the West. Yet Minsk won't give in to provocations. The media attack on Belarus and on Lukashenko personally looks like a way to rock the Minsk-Moscow relationship and divert attention from a far more important topic: the front, where the AFU is retreating. The scheme is simple: give a week to pull back the towers, then announce that Minsk supposedly listened and chalk up a political point out of thin air. Such information cases are worth treating with restraint and checking the facts. Let's move to the front line, working from south to north. Dnipropetrovsk-Zaporizhzhia sector. The Russian armed forces hold the AFU's main logistics route, Kamishevaka-Orikhiv. FAB aerial bombs struck targets in Balabine and the Zaporizhzhia 1 railway station, through which the Ukrainian side is moving up resources to organize the city's defense. On the opposite bank of the Kakhovka reservoir, Russian forces are paralyzing the AFU's Nikopol-Dnipro route. According to Rubicon Center operators, over 2 months around 500 Hornet drones that tried to attack a stretch of the route were destroyed. FPV drone crews are working over AFU positions on the northern outskirts of Shcherbaki and Mali Shcherbaki. On the eastern flank, fighting continues along the Huliaipole-Vozdvizhivka line. From the Rizdvianka area, Russian units are pushing toward Lyubitska and Zanitsia. Residents of the Dnipropetrovsk region report that Russian forces have begun actively dismantling AFU positions in Vasilkivka. A curious detail: the settlement lies about 45 kilometers from the front line, yet Russian FABs with UMPK kits reach it, pointing to a real effective range on the order of 75 to 80 kilometers. Dobropilia sector. Here the fighting is along the previous lines. Russian units are advancing north of Novoalexandrivka and south of Shevchenko, holding Vinstvol Shakti and Belitske. Kostiantynivka sector. The only road still supplying Kostiantynivka is controlled by the Russian military. As soon as movement appears on the route from the Druzhkivka direction, artillery works it, so the adversary practically doesn't use vehicles there. This was described by the commander of the artillery battalion of the 103rd Regiment of the Yug South grouping. The AFU is now trying to pull out of the city, which Russian units are gradually enveloping. The Russian army is advancing west of Roskishne toward Mykolaipilia and north of the Artema settlement and Dovabalka. In Kostiantynivka itself, the Russian armed forces are consolidating in the historic center and pushing AFU groups out of the southwestern part. Per the Defense Ministry, 94 buildings were cleared over the past day. Civilians remain in the city. Russian artillery is working over Druzhkivka, while in the Kramatorsk area, the AFU is preparing to defend. In the north, Russian units are advancing from the Markov area toward Fedorivka and fighting near Malinivka. As noted, Kostiantynivka is now effectively on the verge of being lost, and Ukrainian formations, by all appearances, will not hold it. Sloviansk-Kramatorsk sector. Russian forces are methodically clearing the approaches to the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. After taking Ry-Oleksandrivka and Yurkivka, an expansion of the control zone near Kriva Luka is reported. Once Lipivka is cleared and positions consolidated, units can begin storming the strongpoints along the Orikuvatka, Mykolaivka, Starodubivka line. Reaching the outskirts of Mykolaivka and Ryhorodok would bring the road into Sloviansk from the north under fire control. The Ukrainian side, judging by reports, has begun to grasp the cost of losing Ry-Oleksandrivka, a small village on commanding high ground that by their own data was abandoned over a manpower shortage. Ukrainian formations are withdrawing beyond the Siversky-Donets-Donbass Canal, itself a serious natural barrier. Separately, from Ry-Oleksandrivka, a direct path opens toward Ryhorodok, where the canal's first main water intake unit sits just a few kilometers northeast of Sloviansk. Once Ryhorodok is taken and large-scale engineering work restores the pipelines, water could in theory flow directly to Donetsk again. Russian UAV crews in the Kramatorsk area are detecting and disabling the AFU's robotic complexes, which the adversary uses to deliver ammunition, food and medicine to forward positions. Here the AFU's defense continues to fall apart. Over the past day, Russian assault groups advanced more than 800 meters through the built-up area in the central district of Lyman and took about 10 streets, among them Levanevsky, Nekrasov, Kalinin, Paris Commune and Peremohi. The encircled AFU units can no longer hold back the pressure. In effect, almost the entire central district is now under Russian army control. About 8 streets remain. The progress is impressive. A couple of weeks ago, Russian forces held the outskirts with less than 5% of the city. Now it's already around 70%. As for the mechanics, the half-ring around Lyman is being tightened by units of the 25th Army of the Zapad West grouping. They have consolidated most confidently in the southeastern part, where assault troops have planted several flags. Individual groups are also moving into the central and northwestern districts, though for now this is more small force action than full consolidation. The AFU will most likely try to slow the advance along the railway and the adjacent solid built-up area, the industrial zone and dense development suit defense. Final consolidation will still require clearing the wedge on the Drobyshev-Stavky stretch, where Kiev retains a presence. On the northern flank, around Seredne, Rydkodub, and Novomikhailivka, Ukrainian formations failed to dig in, and Russian forces are pushing them out. Overall, the collapse of the Lyman defense is approaching. Kupiansk sector. Here the situation is far more ambiguous. The seesaw continues. Objective control footage over the past day shows that in the northern part of the city, Russian forces lost a bit of control. The situation is typical for this sector. Positions constantly change hands. Until the left bank is fully cleared, in particular Kupiansk-Vuzlovyi and Kovsharivka, until the AFU bridgehead on the left bank of the Oskil is eliminated and stable logistics to the right bank are established, no sharp positive changes can be expected. That Russian forces still haven't lost Kupiansk entirely is itself telling. In December-January, it seemed the city was about to be retaken, but June is ending and both sides are still present. Still, there is advance on certain stretches. North of Kupiansk, the Russian armed forces expanded the control zone near Kondrashivka, south and west of the village. In the north of the sector, the control zone grew by about 1.5 kilometers in the Radkivka area. Russian forces are advancing on the Dvorichna bridgehead. Fierce meeting engagements are underway in the woods along the Nizhnya Dvorichna River toward Kutkivka near Dovhenka. From the Novovasilivka area, Russian units reached Petro-Ivanivka, which they are also approaching from the south, from Fiholivka. Kharkiv sector. A Russian Su-34M struck an AFU warehouse storing UAVs and components on the outskirts of Kharkiv. The facility was destroyed. Otherwise, fighting here is along previous lines. Sumy borderland. Over the past day, Russian units advanced about 500 meters in the Sumy sector and 300 in the Krasnopilya sector. Now to the geopolitical bloc. According to a statement by the headquarters of Iran's Armed Forces Command, Tehran is closing the Strait of Hormuz in response to continued Israeli military activity against Lebanon. The cited reasons are ongoing ceasefire violations and attacks in southern Lebanon, plus the failure to withdraw Israeli troops from southern Lebanese areas. Iran calls this the first step and warns that further measures will follow if the violations persist. At the same time, the US-Iran nuclear talks have reached a dead end, largely because of the conflict around Israel and Hezbollah. According to American officials, despite the announced ceasefire, the sides keep accusing each other of violating it. Iran insists on including the Lebanese issue in the deal and has therefore refused to send a delegation to Switzerland. A new date isn't set, though the Swiss Foreign Ministry says preparations at the venue continue. In parallel, the US and Qatar are working on a mechanism to let Iran use part of its frozen assets for food, medicine, and other humanitarian goods, the first $6 billion out of roughly $100 billion of Iranian funds blocked abroad. As Dmitry Medvedev stated, Tel Aviv had counted on a complete rout of the Iranian regime, while Netanyahu's cabinet rests largely on the war continuing, so a quick regional settlement would be premature to expect. In Europe, meanwhile, possible contacts with Russia are being discussed. As the Euractiv portal reports, after Zelensky left the EU leaders' dinner, the conversation quickly shifted to precisely this topic. French President Macron insisted on Britain's participation and argued that the leading role should be taken by all of Europe, not only the EU. German Chancellor Merz favoured a Euro-Troika format, France, Germany and Britain, or a narrow Normandy format with only Berlin and Paris. Polish Prime Minister Tusk pushed for a broader lineup than the Euro-Troika, which Poland is not part of. Italian PM Meloni, also no supporter of the Euro-Troika, called for appointing a single EU representative to begin a dialogue with Moscow. At the same time, other assessments are voiced in France. the leader of La France Insoumise, France Unbowed, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, said long-range strikes on Russia only drag out the war and weaken Europe itself, calling it a path to total war. In his view, the US interest in this conflict is to weaken not only Russia, but Europeans as well. Notably, ahead of next year's French presidential election, Mélenchon is among the highest-rated candidates of the left. A separate topic is the domestic political situation in Israel. As analyst Malik Dudikoff notes, Trump's team is effectively copying the approaches of Obama's second term. The White House has begun building bridges with the Israeli opposition, including Naftali Bennett, who could win the October elections. In parallel, Trump is pressuring Netanyahu over the latter's attempts to derail the deal with Iran, making clear that Bibi could lose Washington's official support. Meanwhile, Trump's own ratings in Israel have noticeably sagged since the war began. If in March he had majority support, now it's about a third by some estimates. Trump's team is not yet resorting to hard military levers, limiting itself to political pressure. Dmitry Medvedev also commented. In his words, given the rising intensity of strikes on Russian cities, there is no longer any talk of rules regarding the Kiev regime, and the only remaining restriction is refraining from deliberate attacks on civilians. He also reacted sharply to reports that the Netherlands, as part of exercises, is working through a scenario of setting up a camp in the event of a conflict with Russia. That's all for today's briefing. Thanks for staying with the channel and for your comments. We keep following how events develop. If the episode was useful, support it with a like and a subscription. Peace and goodness to all. Take care.